This is Your Life, and tonight I hope to pay tribute to a living legend, one of the greatest romantic, real-life heroes of our time or any time. Big words, I know, but you'll soon understand why. Well, 16 floors above on the Martini Terrace here in London's Haymarket, a thank-you cocktail party is going on for a number of people who've raised thousands of pounds for handicapped children. Many famous people from many walks of life are there. And a £50,000 cheque is being presented by the man I'm after, a man whose life defies fiction as a story of soul-stirring heroism. Here goes.
And so, to all of you, thank you, Sparks.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As Colonel Andrew Braley-Smith knows, I'm hoping... I'm hoping to make another presentation tonight to the president of the association that presented that cheque on behalf of the Crippled Children Research. And I mean you, Sir Douglas, I hope you will accept the presentation and the salute, because tonight, Group Captain Sir Douglas Bader, this is your life. Every one of you are invited back to the theatre just across the way. I can't wait to tell even the tiny bit of this most extraordinary story. Well, what a reception, and all these marvellous friends of yours from that cocktail party where we surprised you, and you gave me a very peculiar salute. But someone else very special in your life was at that party too, and of course she's here, your wife, Joan. Now, Joan, you weren't alone in keeping the secret.
No, I wasn't. Quite a few of us kept it for quite a long time, and it wasn't very easy, I can tell you. I shall get shot when I get home, but never mind.
And the rest of the family we must meet, which won't take too long because they're here. Stepdaughters Jane with her husband Gary, Wendy with her husband David, and stepson Michael, your only cousin Sue Goodhue, and great family friend Claire Hoare, and for 40 years, very close to you, author, former member of Parliament, and ex-wing commander Laddie Lucas and his wife Jill. Well, two members of the family missing for the simple reason it's lights out for them at this time, but before they turned in, they turned up at the RAF Museum at Hendon to crew the kind of old hurricane you flew in the Battle of Britain. Take a look there, your grandchildren, Wendy's son Charlie and Jane's son Adam, both just 2 years old. Thank you, Charlie and Adam. Well, now, when you were their age, Douglas, you lived with your family in Hampstead in London after your father had returned from his job as a civil servant in India. Laddie Lucas there has just published a book about you called Flying Colours, but Long before you learned to fly, you were winning your colours at just about every sport at St Edward's School near Oxford. Your favourites are boxing, cricket and rugby. Here you are on the school rugby team in 1928. And we found a rugby report in the Sunday Times of 54 years ago of a school's match you played in. And it reads, Bader put Hunt in on the blind side, whilst a few minutes later he kicked well ahead on the slippery turf, and after Hunt had smothered the fullback, scored. We found that same rugby teammate from nearly 60 years ago, Robert Hunt. Douglas, your uncle Cyril was adjutant at Cranwell and you wanted to become a cadet there. Your father, an army major in the Great War, had died and your mother could no longer afford your school fees. So your history teacher pays those school fees himself rather than see you forced to leave. Now, your gratitude to him is matched only by his pride in you. He's 82 now and unable to travel from his home near Brighton, but it's from there that he talks to you now. That wonderful man you mentioned, Walter Dingwall.
Hello, Douglas. I have in front of me a photograph of the sixth form for 1927, in which you are seated and your chief friend, the late Dennis Abbott, is standing behind. There are many memories of our life together, but one vivid memory is when you tell me in my office that you wished to enter the Air Force, and I challenged you to win a prize cadetship at Cranwell. Dennis went to Sandhurst, and you won your prize cadetship at Cranwell. And now, Douglas, I just hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Walter Dingwall. You go on to win that Cranwell scholarship and you're in the boxing team, hockey team, cricket 11, and after graduation win such distinction for the RAF on the rugby field that although you don't know it at the time, you're selected for the full England international squad. But it was not to be. The morning of Monday, December 14th, 1931, sees you flying over to an aero club near Reading with a couple of other young officers. It's a simple social call, but we can see the dramatic result of that clear winter's morning of 50 years ago reconstructed in the famous film based on your life, Reach for the Sky. A much acclaimed performance by Kenneth Moore, who became a good family friend, but as you're aware, Kenneth has suffered severe illness recently, and much as he wanted, can't be here. But he has sent a special message and a special messenger, his wife, Angela Douglas. Angela, your message from Kenny.
He sends you lots of love and says, My dear Douglas, you know very well why I can't be with you this evening, more's the pity. But I'm sending my old lady along to represent me. She's been in love with you for years anyway, it's true. Your inspiration and courage is quite rightly a legend. It was with me all through the film and is with me still. God bless you. Up the RAF. Love from us both, Kenny.
Thank you. Angela Douglas. And of course, thanks and best wishes to you, Kenny Moore. Douglas, your own comment on that crash in which you lost both legs is recorded in your flying logbook. There it is. 14th of December, 1931, and it says simply and typically, bad show. Laddie Lucas, you two, of course, flew in fighters in the war, and when you were researching your new book about Douglas, you asked him if he could explain that accident in a little more detail. What did he say?
His exact words were, I just made a balls of it, old boy. That was all that there was to it.
But Douglas, just before you're invalided out of the RAF, you prove you can still fly, even though you have artificial limbs. A pal takes you up, and you bring the aircraft into land, but no one believes it.
So, next time, you made sure everyone on the ground knew it was Douglas Bader flying again.
The lifelong friend who flew with you that day nearly 50 years ago, Air Vice Marshal Joe Cox. Fellas, just how did everyone know Douglas was in control of that aircraft?
Well, it was the 10th of March, 1933, at Royal Air Force, Duxford, and Douglas had flown with me a couple of days or so beforehand, and he had executed some excellent aerobatics and a perfect landing. But unfortunately, our chums just would not believe that he landed that aircraft. So he asked me if I would take him up again, and that when the time came for us to come into land, that I would hold my hands above my head so that there'd be absolutely no doubt as to who was flying the aircraft. And that was done, and he made another perfect landing.
Thank you, Air Vice Marshal Joe Cox. But the RAF still decides you should be invalided out of the service. In 1933, you move into lodgings and start looking for a job. Now, it's only after many an interview you start work with the Shell Oil Company selling airline fuel. On the strength of that £200 a year job, you marry your first wife, Thelma, a tower of strength to you until she died 10 years ago. And so you start to rebuild your life. Of course, you miss flying, but you miss sport too. You decide to have a crack at golf. And as we can see, astonishingly play the game with such skill and determination that over the years you got your handicap down to a remarkable 4. Now, you've played with some of the most famous people in the land, not only from the world of professional golf, but dedicated amateurs like yourself. And here for your 19th hole party tonight, Eric Sykes, Alan Minter, Henry Cooper, Dickie Henderson, and former British US and Open champion, Tony Jacklin.
Tony, thanks for coming on. Oh, what a collection.
And Douglas, there's someone else who recalls playing golf with you on a visit you made 10 years ago to Hollywood. During the war, he was a much decorated colonel in the American Air Force, but he's perhaps better known to millions of cinema goers the world over as playing Mr. James Stewart.
Sir Douglas, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to pay my respects to you and congratulate you on the outstanding contribution you made to your country in the war. I also remember a delightful golf game we had at the Bel Air Country Club in California, especially a beautiful bunker shot you made on the 18th hole, which sort of secured victory for you. Again, it's wonderful to pay my respects to you, and I salute you.
Thank you, James Stewart. Douglas, we all have our own heroes in sport, and you have yours in golf. No talk of the game for you tonight would be complete without him. Wartime pilot himself in the South African Air Force, 4 times winner of the British Open Championship. From his home in Johannesburg, we've flown him specially for you tonight, the great Bobby Locke. Bobby, I know how highly you rate Douglas's game, don't you?
I said, go and sit with the other.
Well, I must confess, ladies and gentlemen, the games we've had, he's carried me very well, and I've helped him at the 90. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby Locke. Douglas, the day the German army marched into Poland, you asked the RAF to let you fly again. You're summoned to the Air Ministry, then just a few yards down the road from where you're sitting right now. The result of searching tests is that you may fly again. Now, after Dunkirk, you're appointed squadron leader to 242 Squadron at Coltishall in East Anglia. Now, the squadron had taken a battering in France. Now France had fallen, and as Churchill put it, the Battle of Britain is about to begin. You, Douglas, were among the first to take to the skies and take on a confident enemy. You blast some damaging holes in that confidence, but don't escape unscathed.
You came back to refuel, and just the thickness of a piece of chewing gum between you and your life.
He fixed your bullet-torn Hurricane, squadron leader, engineer Knocker West, and with him, station warrant officer Tubby Mays. All right, I want to ask him something first. Bernard, that sounded like a very close shave to me.
Yes, well, he pulled into the dispersal hangar, and I looked in, and the first thing I saw was bullets had gone through the side of the cockpit, clipped the part of his flying suit, complete with chewing gum.
But Tubby Mays, Douglas had only one thing in mind.
That's right. Well, all he wanted to do was to refuel, rearm, replenish chewing gum, and up spirits. Away.
Well, the man who day and night refitted your shot-to-pieces engines during the Battle of Britain returned to live in Canada 37 years ago. But to complete this reunion, we've flown him 5,000 miles from Carnsland, Alberta, your aerofitter, Noel Barlow. Thank you, Noel Barlow, Knocker West, Tubby Mays. Thank you. Only bad weather offers the odd moment of respite from that epic battle in the air. You snatch a couple of hours one night during the Battle of Britain and go to the pictures in Cambridge with one of your pilots. Now, the program has started, the auditorium in darkness, and you trip over a step in the aisle.
And you call to the usherette, "I've damaged my leg. Bring me a damn screwdriver."
Then a lowly pilot officer, now Air Marshal Sir Dennis Crowley Milling. Sir Dennis, did Douglas get the screwdriver?
Well, not straight away. I mean, she looked down at him in amazement because, of course, we were in uniform, obviously pilots. But Douglas, in his usual colourful language, insisted on getting a screwdriver, and this poor girl finally got one. Douglas was sitting in the aisle, pulled up his trouser, used the screwdriver to sort of pin back a bit of metal that had stopped the artificial leg working, worked it once or twice, stood up, handed the screwdriver back and said, "Thank you very much," and sat down. And the poor girl was looking at him in absolute, complete astonishment.
Thank you, Sir Dennis Crowley Milling. During those early days of the war, you make many friends, including a station commander who, while escorting a bomber, attacked an enemy aircraft in front, only to be fired on by another Messerschmitt from behind. Now, he gets his airplane back, is treated for his wounds, then with you has to attend a top brass meeting. You're already seated in the conference room when he walks in and has to pass you. And suddenly, he lets out a yell of anguish.
"That's because you hit me exactly where the blasted Messerschmitt hit me."
From that day, 41 years ago now, Air Chief Marshal Sir Harry Broadhurst. Sir Harry, tell me what had happened.
Well, it was a classic dogfight situation where your dangerous moment is when you're concentrating on shooting the other chap down, and his little friend comes along and does the same to you. And in the process, filled my ample backside with debris. So I go home, and I'm telephoned in hospital. Would I attend a very important conference of wing leaders and such like? And I'm late, and I stroll down the aisle. I might have guessed that's what was going to happen. "Hello, hello, hello," he said, "running away from the enemy again." slapped me on the backside. We've been friends ever since, I think.
Well, thank you, Sir Harry Broadhurst. But looking at this emblem on the side of your Hurricane, Douglas, it's someone else besides Sir Harry who's getting it in the rear, as far as you're concerned.
Oh, yes, marvellous.
Now, Douglas, you'd a favourite song during the war, sung by someone who is in Australia tonight, but who recalls it especially for you now. Who else but the wartime sweetheart of the forces, legend Dame Vera Lynn?
Hello, Eamon. Hello, Dougie. Do you remember that song? Well, that was the one that I dedicated especially for you at a certain concert at the Victoria Palace, well, some years ago now. It was a charity run for the RAF Association, and it was being televised, but somehow you weren't there. But the next day I was very thrilled to have a phone call from you to say that you were at home listening and watching. And, well, we've been friends ever since. My love and everyone's love to you, Dougie, and hope to see you soon and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Dame Vera Lynn. Douglas, I'd like to take you back now to the 19th of September 1940 to Foulmere in Cambridgeshire. The call came to scramble and take off to engage the enemy. Among your pilots that day was a youngster of just 20, who about 3 weeks earlier had bailed out after his Spitfire had been blasted from the sky over Dover. His squadron, which had been flying since just before the beginning of the war, had suffered very heavy casualties while he'd been recovering on sick leave. Now, still shaken and feeling distinctly nervous, he was back for more. As the fighters climb, he hears your voice over the radio calling base.
I could hardly believe my ears. You were actually asking the controller to arrange a game of squash for later that day.
The same youngster who went on to become a group captain himself, Hugh Dundas. And with him, two other pilots with whom you flew on an astonishing 62 missions from Tangmere in 1941, Flight Lieutenant Alan Smith. And the man who personally shot down 38 enemy aircraft more than any other pilot in the Allied force, Air Vice Marshal Johnny Johnson. Hugh, the effect on you hearing Douglas about to go into battle fixing up a game of squash.
Well, Eamon, it certainly worked wonders for my rather jaded morale at that time. But then, you see, that was Douglas all over. He absolutely exuded confidence and a sort of cheerful defiance, which immediately communicated itself to all the rest of us.
And Johnny Johnson, he gave a lot of encouragement to young pilots.
Well, the great man had the time and the inclination to teach the pilot officers, not the Air Vice Marshals, Douglas, the pilot officers, how to get on the tail of a 109 and to impart his considerable skills and so on. And also his complete fearlessness sort of inspired the whole wing. The leadership came right from the top down to the bottom. And his idea of a Saturday afternoon off, it was to take Cocky and Alan Smith and one or two other poor unfortunates over the Channel or the Pas de Calais in the hope we might encounter Dolph O'Galland and such from our Avenue.
Alan, although you four invariably flew together, there was another pilot important to you all.
Yes, I think Johnny's point of fearlessness was the main thing, because my main recollection of Dougie, as Johnny says, and whenever we were over France, which was often, everybody else came home, the operation was finished, Douglas was still flying around looking for someone to fight. I've always regretted that I was not flying that particular day, but we had a first-class reserve.
Well, that first-class reserve on this team of yours was a New Zealander who, after the war, returned to his home in Hamilton.
But I've flown on a very special mission tonight, Douglas. All 13,000 miles.
To complete this reunion for the first time in 41 years, Squadron Leader Jeff West.
Oh, no.
Jeff, you were flying at number 2 in the formation on the 9th of August, 41?
Unfortunately, I was. And we were over the other side, and Douglas said, come on, chaps, there's a gaggle of 109s down here. There's plenty for all, chaps. And one was just coming up, and I was about to press the tit, and I saw that he was going to do it on the same one, so I had to pull across and take another one.
Yes.
And I'm afraid I lost him. And I shot this other thing down and span on top of it. When I recovered from the spin, the sky was empty, and I lost you.
I think he'd shot me down.
In fact, when you got back and found him missing, you feared the worst, didn't you? Seriously?
Well, yes, we did, as a matter of fact. We haven't heard from him, after all. We haven't heard anything. We thought he might be in the drink. And so we quickly refueled, and I got Johnny and Jeff and another chap, and we went off and flew up and down the French coast for a bit. Finally, it sunk in that he really was missing. And I must say, seriously, that was a very, very devastating moment for all of us, because Douglas as a leader was just bloody marvellous, and I must say that to his face. He was just bloody marvellous. And the thought that we might have lost him forever was really very devastating. I should have known better, shouldn't I? He's been organising our lives ever since.
Thank you. You've done this. Jeff West, Alan Smith, and Johnny Johnson.
He's not bad even now.
In fact, Douglas, no one had seen you bail out after an enemy aircraft had torn away the rear half of your Spitfire in a mid-combat collision as he veered to escape your attack on 2 Messerschmitts. And as you bailed out, your right leg, trapped, was ripped away. Had it not been an artificial limb, you would have plunged to your death in the cockpit of the Spitfire. As it was, you were captured and taken to hospital at St. Omer by a strange coincidence, the town where your father had died as a result of his First World War wounds. Jill Lucas, you were Douglas's sister-in-law, and you shared the long wait for news.
Yes, they were terrible days. We couldn't eat, we couldn't sleep. Every day just seemed endless, and we worried and worried what had happened to him. And then after 5 days, the phone went, Thelma answered it, and she heard the Germans had sent a signal. They got him, he was safe, and it was absolutely wonderful, and we sat down and had an enormous meal.
But the Germans had got you all right, a prisoner, but it wasn't your intention to stay a prisoner for long if you could help it. Even in the hospital bed, you started to plan escape. And an unusual invitation offers the possibility of a very cheeky opportunity. The German commander of the famous JG-26 fighter wing with whom you'd inevitably exchange fire in mid-air combat invites the daredevil British Spitfire pilot with no legs to tea. He's one of Germany's ace fighter pilots and is prepared to accede to your request to let you have a close on-the-ground look at the famous Messerschmitt 109. You ask a favor. Could you sit in the cockpit? Certainly, came the courteous reply. And once in the cockpit, you had another request.
You actually asked me if you could take my Messerschmitt for a circle around the airfield.
Enemies then, but great friends now, from his home in Bonn, General Adolf Galland. General Galland, tell me, what was your reaction to Douglas's request for a circuit of the airfield?
I knew that he was able and capable to fly my airplane, but in this situation in the war, I was not allowed to give him the allowance to make a circle around the airfield. I would have to step in very soon and follow you. And then the trouble would continue. So I'm happy, Douglas, we didn't do this.
But General Galland, you were to meet again in 1945, this time when you were taken prisoner.
Oh, yes. I was not taken prisoner. I present myself, and the war was over, and we surrendered. And I came to the Camp 7 in Latimer, and they brought me over to Tangmer.
That's right.
He was on the gate, and he had a big case of cigars on his arm. I will never forget this, Douglas.
Yeah, jolly good.
Thank you, General Galahad. Well, back at 616 Squadron, you may be out of sight, but you're far from out of mind, as this message on the side of Johnny Johnson's Spitfire reminds everyone Bader's bus company still running. And you've yet another request to put to General Galahad, that a new pair of legs be dropped to you from England. Permission is granted.
And the new legs were dropped safely.
Great wartime friend and golfing partner to this day, Air Commodore Al Deere. So Al, tell me, how was the drop made?
Well, it was decided in the circumstances of the recipient here that we couldn't accept the German offer to have a free flight in. Therefore a bombing raid on Saint-Omer was laid on, Blenheim's, one of which carried the leg. I was the unfortunate to have detail in the close escort Spitfires, which was a tough job, as you remember.
Very good stuff, yes.
And we had a hell of a job getting in and out, but he got his leg.
Thank you, Air Commodore Al Deere. Well, told you're soon to be moved to a prisoner of war camp in Germany, you hasten your escape plans and enlist the cooperation of a French nurse. She has contacts on the outside who are prepared to meet up with you and give you refuge if, of course, you manage to escape. And if you look at that screen, Douglas, we're going to Saint-Omer now. There's the hospital window from which you slung your rope of tied-together bed sheets and a photograph of your escape tactics taken at the time. And there was someone without whose help you could not have made that escape. A nurse, Lucille de Becker, now Madame Glano.
Bonjour, Colonel Bader. Il y a bien longtemps que je vous ai aidé à vous évader.
Hello, Colonel Bader. It has been a long time since I helped you to escape from the clinic's terrain. It seems incredible that a man with no legs would want to escape to England to continue the fight against the Germans. You are the best. You were taken from the hospital to the other side of Saint-Omer, along the Rue de la Faïencerie, through the gate of number 95 to the house of Madame Yek. This is the bedroom where you rested after your ordeal. And downstairs, you met Madame Petit. And Mr. Bader, here is the room where I met you. You asked me to get you a toothbrush and some toothpaste, which I brought back straight away. We were supposed to come back in the afternoon with my husband, who is now deceased, to bring you the bandages for your legs. Unfortunately, the Germans had already discovered you in the barn at the back of the house.
And the lady with her late husband took that enormous risk to hide you, now aged 98, Madame Yek.
Bonjour, Mr. Bader. Vous pouvez revenir quand vous voulez, vous serez toujours le bienvenu de la maison. Et vous serez toujours vu comme l'enfant de la maison. Et puis...
Hello, Mr. Bader. You can come back anytime you want to. You always be welcome in this house. And you always be considered as the son of the house.
Et un bon Anglais.
He is a very brave man, Bader, and a very good Englishman.
Thank you, Madame Yek. Madame Petit and Madame Glano in Saint-Omer. Now, as you know, Douglas, for aiding the courageous escape attempt by yourself and others like you, Madame Yek and Lucille Glano were imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp for the duration of the war. At war's end, they received the highest decorations France can bestow. Well, at 98, Madame Yek cannot travel, but tonight, proudly wearing her award for supreme courage, the Légion d'honneur, French resistance heroine, Lucille Glano. the next 4 years, Douglas, you're a prisoner of war. In every prison camp you try to escape. Your courage and refusal to give in was a great morale booster to all.
Remember, when we tried tunnelling out at Warburg, we got rid of the soil by filling your legs with it.
With you in Warburg and Stalag Luft 3, Fleet Air Arm Observer David Lubbock. Also from Stalag Luft 3, Wing Commander Bob Stanford Tuck. And from Colditz, Colonel Philip Pardo. And Scots Guards Captain Lord Linlithgow. David, Douglas filled his artificial legs with soil when you were tunneling, right?
Yes, he did. You see, we had to get rid of the damn stuff. And you could see he was stomped off down to the circuit of the camp.
Sure.
And then he would fall over the tripwire and then get rid of the sand. It was an ingenious idea, but it couldn't last for very long.
No, it didn't.
But Colonel Pardo, those hollow legs came in useful again towards the end of the war when in Colditz you were on near starvation rations.
Yes, that's right. He persuaded the Germans to let him go out for a walk outside the camp, escorted, of course, by a sentry. And in no time, Douglas had fixed this sentry to look the wrong way, the other way, you see, when required. And he'd also fixed a German farmer to leave some corn in a little culvert under the road in exchange, again, for a packet of cigarettes or two. So every time he went out for a walk, he'd stop by the culvert, the German would look the other way, the corn was poured down into his legs in exchange for the cigarettes, and back staggered Douglas into the camp, 1 stone heavier than he went out. And believe me, it made a big difference to our starvation rations at the time.
And Lord Linlithgow, you were in Colditz with Douglas, but there was an occasion when he tried to escape from the prison camp at Warburg.
Yes, Douglas, you'll remember.
Oh, yes.
Bloody old Warburg.
Yes, yes.
Remember it? And I can describe it very, very shortly. What happened was that it was winter, damn cold, and then at night they crawled out and they bumped a sentry. Do you remember?
Yeah, very well indeed.
And I should think he was going to the airport, wasn't
he was going to have a pee or something.
Yeah, I think you're right.
He walked straight into him.
And they walked straight into him. And he reacted in the way that you would always expect the German sentries. The shouting starts. And in a paroxysm of rage, he picked up a rifle like that with the butt at the bottom, and he stamped it down, bang, like that, on the nearest available foot, which happened to be Douglas's. But instead of a howl of pain, there was a roar of laughter from Douglas.
Bob Stanford Tuck at Stalag Luft 3. Now, Douglas made such a nuisance of himself with the German guards, he was told he was being moved to Colditz.
Yes, that's nothing unusual.
What did he do then?
Well, the final day came, as you remember, Douglas, when...
indeed.
Yeah, you had to go. And he kicked up a hell of a fuss and commotion about it to get him out of the camp and through the first gate. And finally, he played about with his legs and things, I think, but finally they were getting very, very angry, these soldiers, to escort him out of the main gate. And they were starting to shake their rifles like this, and I was getting very worried for Douglas's safety, or most of all, 1 or 2 of us too, with it. But finally, I think he saw the light, and he trundled off with them, and they got through this first gate, where there was quite an appreciable row of German soldiers all drawn up rigidly like this to escort him out of the camp. And he sort of stomped down them, looking at each one like this from toe to head, uniform, this, that, and the other. And a fellow next to me said, "Good Lord, he's actually inspecting the buggers."
Thank you, Bob Stanford Tuck, Lord Linlithgow, Philip Pardo, and David Well, back home at war's end, Douglas, your own heroism and that of so many of your friends and colleagues here tonight is not forgotten, as we can see at the victory celebrations when the many, in teeming thousands, turned out to say thanks to the few.
Group Captain Vader, a legless fighter ace and ex-prisoner of war, led the fly past in his Spitfire on Battle of Britain Day. And what a sight it was for Londoners this fine, peaceful September morning of 1945.
You retire from the RAF as group captain in 1946 and rejoin Shell Company, where you work your way to the top as managing director of the company's aviation department, running a fleet of aircraft. And Douglas, we've a special reunion from Shell for you right now with colleagues from those days who were so special to you. Your secretary for 17 years, Joan Hargreaves, the pilot with whom you flew all over the world, often taking turn of the controls, Jamie Rees, and from The Hague, former managing director of Royal Dutch Shell Group, Jonkheer John H. Loudon. John, when Douglas retired in 1969, the company had a special gift for him.
Yes, we had a special gift because he'd been flying ever since he was the head of our Shell aircraft company. He had an aeroplane, and when he retired, we thought he couldn't do without one, so we gave it to him. But he was, apart from being the managing director, that he was much more, and he was really what I would call an ambassador for Shell, but a non-career ambassador, if you understand what I want to say.
Well, Douglas, many honors and battle decorations have been bestowed on you in your long and distinguished career, but certainly the most unusual came in 1957 in Alberta, Canada, at the Indian reservation of the Kainai tribe. And to tell us about that decoration, with his wife Rosaline, the chief himself, with the proud title, Chief Jim Shot Both Sides. Oh, wait now, I want to ask him. Tell me, please, what title did you confer on Sir Douglas?
Chief Morning Bird.
Chief Morning Bird Bader. Thank you, Jim and Rosalie. Now, if Chief Morning Bird Bader will be kind enough to sit down for a moment.
I had to escort him down there.
Now, Douglas, since your retirement, you do even more work for the disabled. You're also invited to join the board of the Civil Aviation Authority, and a friend from your time together in Stalag Luft 3 asked you to join the board of his executive car hire business. You're delighted to be asked and call at the Belgravia garage to see your old pal, who always has the same greeting.
Douglas Bader, hero of mine, undo your top button and shoot me a line.
Friend and business colleague, Wing Commander Paddy Barthrop. Didn't Douglas get a damp welcome one day?
Well, he comes to the garage just as we were on the ball about 3 or 4 days a week, see that all the cars are clean, and he quite often wants to spend a penny when he gets there, and he has a habit of taking the most direct route between 2 points for obvious reasons. And this particular day, there was a bloody great Rolls Royce in the middle of the garage with a new Sherpa sitting on top of a ladder trying to polish the roof, with soap everywhere, it really was. So he goes stamping through this sort of thing, and the fellow said, excuse me, sir, you'll get your feet wet. And he said, young man, he said, this is a problem I will never have. I may get the buggers rusty, but I never get
Thank you, Paddy Barthrop. Douglas, you met Joan through playing golf, and you were married on January 3rd, 1973. Joan, your memory of that first meeting with Douglas?
On the golf course? Well, I was practicing, I think, and I probably had some tight trousers on, and he thought, well, you know, she doesn't play badly and she doesn't look too bad, maybe. So he thought, well, I'll ask her to play with me in the next mixed foursome. So that's what we did.
Well, Douglas, since your retirement, you really have thrown yourself into your voluntary work for the disabled. In fact, the cheque you handed over tonight to Action Research for the Crippled Child brings the total since you've been president of the fundraising Sparks organisation to over £250,000 in just 5 years. But you're not just content to raise money. As you displayed by example in the war, raising spirits is just as important. And you do that, Douglas, as we can hear, by calling on people when their spirits are at their lowest, like the visit you paid to a house in Aldershot, from where, with his family, the former army corporal who lost both legs on duty in Belfast talks to you now. 21-year-old Philip Hartley.
Hello, Sir Douglas, and greetings from the family too. The best piece of advice you gave me, sir, was when you said that once you'd got tin legs, you'd have to keep a great sense of humour, no matter how difficult that may be. Well, sir, thank you for your visit and the advice that you gave me, and I hope you have a very nice evening.
You also called at a house 6,000 miles away in South Africa, and we're going to Newlands near Cape Town to hear from a couple whose son lost both legs due to a crippling form of meningitis when he was only 16 months old. Michael and Margaret Ellis-Smith, daughter Claire, and now age 4, their son Paul.
Hello, Sir Douglas.
Hello, Sir Douglas.
You made an enormous impact on Paul, you really did. It was so important for him to know that there was somebody just like him and who could get around and do so much. This was very important because he had never come across any such person before. Thank you for coming to see me.
Those two families knew in advance you planned to call, but we're going to hear now from someone who got the surprise of her life when you knocked on the door of a little house in West Ham in London's East End, the home of 83-year-old Nellie Walpole.
Oh, yes. Hello, Sir Douglas. I hope Eamon Andrews gave you as a big surprise tonight as you gave me when you came knocking on my door. When I lost both my legs, a friend of mine who wishes to remain anonymous wrote to you and addressed her letter as such. Sir Douglas Barder, war hero. I do not know your address, but the postman delivered it, God bless him. All the letter asked for was a signed photograph of you. And you came round the same day in person and you stayed to tea, leaving me with a photograph of yourself signed to Nellie Walpole, a great lady. When I look at that in the morning, I know it's going to be a great day. Have a great night tonight, Sir Douglas. We'll be raising our glasses to you tonight in Corporation Street. Cheers to a great man. God bless.
Thank you, Nellie Walpole. In 1976, Douglas, your unflagging work on behalf of the disabled brings you a knighthood. Just a couple of weeks before you're to present yourself for the investiture by Her Majesty the Queen, you get a telephone call from an official at Buckingham Palace.
And Douglas, the official said that he had a rather delicate question to put to you.
He was there to receive his own knighthood on the very same day. Good friend of yours and one of the greats of the cinema, Sir John Mills. So, Sir John, tell us, what was this delicate question?
Well, I was in the anteroom, Buckingham Palace, and I was the only actor present. And I got a terrible attack of first-night nerves. I thought I should really muck it up. And he said, it's all right, old boy, it'll just be a scoot. No bother, no bother. He said, you know what happened to me? He said, I was in the bathroom, he said, about 3 weeks ago, and the phone rang. And I picked it up, and I said, hello, who's that? I said, Buckingham Palace on the telephone. Oh, really? Yes. Who do you want to speak to? Sir Douglas? Who's that? Oh, me, yes, right. Well, what can I do for you? Well, boy said, well, Sir Douglas, it's a rather delicate, rather embarrassing question. He said, well, shoot, what is it? He said, well, it's a question of, Sir Douglas, kneeling down. Do you think you could
manage that. And so he said, well, how high is the stool? So I said, a foot and a half. He said, a foot and a half. Right, hang on. So he left the phone dangling in the bathroom, disappeared in the bedroom. About 3 minutes later, he came back and said, hello? Is that Buckingham Palace? You're still there? I said, yes. He said, I'm terribly sorry, old boy. It's no good. I've just fallen on the arse.
How did it go on a big day?
Well, of course, he stole the show. He always does. And he finally walked on and stood there in front of the Queen, and sword went up in the air, and he was knighted. I think that he's probably the only man who's been knighted standing up, and it was a very, very, very moving moment. And I can't think of anybody that I know who deserves the accolade more. Well done, Douglas.
Thank you, Sir John Mills.
But Douglas, not quite all, because I have a message sent to you tonight from Clarence House with a request that it is to be read to you on this program. It is to Group Captain Sir Douglas Bader, CBE, DSO, DFC, and it reads: During the dark days of the Second World War, those of you who served in the Allied Air Forces brought hope and confidence to the people of this country through your courage, skill, and determination. In times of peace, you have been an inspiration to the young and have given encouragement and support to many who have suffered physical misfortune. I send you this evening my greetings and warmest good wishes for health and happiness in the years ahead. Elizabeth R., Queen Mother. Final tribute, the Royal Air Force march past Group Captain Sir Douglas Bader. This is your life.